Okay, so the next thing we're going to take a look at here is the lunge. So first thing you want to keep in mind is it's basically the same as the first step of an advance. The difference is that you're typically going to lunge, and not always, but you're typically going to lunge a little bit farther from that, and you're going to keep your rear foot fixed on the ground. So instead of catching up like you do on the advance, you're just going to advance the front foot, landing on the heel, rolling through. The key here is, even from day one with beginners, is you want to start training them to extend the arm, the lead arm, so your sword arm, before they lunge out. So at least start the extension, if not fully out. Sometimes for beginners, it's good to get it fully out. So take a look here. Extend the arm. And then what you do is you really push off the rear leg. So your leg on guard should be in a bent, powerful position. And what you really do is lifting up that front leg and springing off of the rear leg. And they call that an extension. So you're extending the arm and you're extending the leg out. The next step from there is the recovery. So on the recovery, one thing that you can see me do is a little bit of a weight transfer. So the first step on the recovery is I'm going to bend the rear knee. It's a little harder to see in the poofy pants, but you can see my knees start to bend, and then I push off the front foot and go right back into my stance with a bent arm again. So extending that arm out, bending the knee, and recovering. There was a little slower one for you. And you can do so a little bit farther. A very short lunge, that's still a lunge, or a deeper one is a lunge. And basically with Highland Broadsword, for the most part, is on those lunges, you're going to be keeping the torso completely upright. It's okay to bend forward a tad if you're really reaching for the opponent, depending on the cut that you're making. But in general, it's best to at least practice it so that the torso is always completely upright. And the main reason is because as soon as you lean that torso forward, it's slower to recover. And when you're fencing with sharps, or even really blunt swords, the recovery is more important a lot of the times than the lunge. So it's more important to have a fast recovery. Let's take a look at it here again. A short lunge, medium lunge, and a slightly deeper lunge. And all of those are necessary for Highland Broadsword. Ideally, most of the time we want to be lunging at like about 60% of our maximum range. And I didn't do the maximum range lunge there, but about 60%. And really that's true of all fencing. Like most of the time you don't want to be overextended. Yeah, some people like getting into the really, really deep lunges, but even the way that I was taught sport fencing was about a 60% lunge. So they call that a demi lunge in the sources. Okay, so the next one that we're going to do here, let's take a look, is the appel. So what I'm going to do with the appel is I start by starting to advance that lead leg, and instead of touching with my heel there, what I'm going to do is tap the ball of my foot, tap it, and then use it as a springboard to lunge. So this is a really common attack that's made in 17th century or 18th century fencing. And you're going to see like Sinclair, a lot of the French small sword masters use it as well. So it's good to know that. But the basic idea is that it's kind of a broken rhythm that you're attacking on. And you may get somebody to react because they'll see a little bit of forward motion with the foot. In general, I don't prefer the appel. I prefer something called like a false step or just a step of the foot, because I find that most people don't really fall for it, especially not on wooden floors or some sort of tile where you get like a little bit of a slapping noise. A lot of times in the Highland games we're fencing on grass, but that said, it does the same thing as the step. They're actually really identical. It's just whether you land on the ball of your foot or the heel. So you can see I'm getting partial extension there on the appel itself. I'm starting the extension, and then I continue the attack. And it's just a springboard. Like you should immediately lunge out as soon as you make that touch. All right, so the next one here is the false step that I was talking about. So really with steps, like the way you're typically taught them in most of your HEMA classes, most of your fencing classes, especially French, if you're doing classical French fencing, is you'll be taught the advance as 2 steps. So really, as like a single step rather, but really it's 2 steps. It's 2 tempo or tempi, and you're starting the first one with the lead foot, and then you take a second step with the rear foot. They're not always paired together, and that's what this lesson is really teaching, is breaking them up, breaking up the footwork, it opens up like a world of possibilities with what you're able to do. So if we just go back, what I'm doing there is I am starting an advance. I'm checking to see what the heck is happening, and then I'm going to continue it forward because for whatever reason it was safe to. So I start, and then I continue forward with a real advance. So I kind of check and then go forward with a real advance. So same thing to the rear. I'm going to check backwards, see the reaction, and then continue back. And it's usually good to get people, even if you don't plan on doing it in a lesson that day, it's good to slowly start implementing the footwork way, way before you ever intend to use it during the drills or the partnered lessons. And you can just kind of do this across the gym floor of showing them different footwork patterns so that by the time the actual drill where you're using it comes along, they've done it like many times and it'll just come a little bit natural to them. So now I'm using that same kind of false step or step to start a lunge, just like I did with the appel, except instead of the appel, I'm actually landing a little bit on the heel and it's a real step. So there we go. It's really the same thing. Just, yeah. I can land on the toe too, like I'm doing there, or flat-footed. Here I'm doing the same thing. I'm showing back and then lunging forward. So you might get somebody to come as you kind of start pulling them backwards with that rear step. They might catch on to that and they might try to follow you forward, and then you get timing to hit them in that. That's kind of advanced though. But again, like I said, from day one, start showing them advanced footwork and implementing it to drills across the floor. And here we're just taking a look at an advanced lunge. So we're pairing those together. So I'm going to do an advance. And then the key with this is really the rhythm. So from day one, again, you want to teach people proper rhythm. And the rhythm for this one is going to be slow on the advance. And then as soon as that final foot touches, springboard off of it into the lunge. So you're kind of using the advance to probe slowly what their reactions are, decide whether it's safe or not, so that you have time to lunge out there. So let's take a look at that. So it's a nice, and I could have done it a little quicker, but it's a nice slow advance and kind of a sudden lunge out. You get them extending that arm right from the advance. Same thing here again. Actually this time I'm showing the gain step. So one thing that you can do instead of advancing, this is shown in Thomas Page, I think it's also shown in Roworth too, is you start the advance, and I'll just pause it on that. Instead of going back into your stance with the rear foot, you're actually going to steal some space and bring the rear foot right up to the front foot. So you cover like a couple more feet, and that makes your lunge all the deeper without really making yourself vulnerable. And then again, like immediately springboarding off of that into a lunge. Here we're showing like a crossover or a pass. So again, you can break up any of those steps and pause along the way. So that front foot passing back or the front foot passing forward. These aren't typically used that much in Highland Broadsword, except for like kind of at the beginning of a match, or especially when you're grappling, you'll use it a lot. It's more common in other thrust weapons. And I think the reason for that might be the prevalence of the leg cut, because as soon as you're fully committed with broadsword, you can get that leg chopped right off, which kind of sucks. And here we're working on the slip. So that is pulling the leg back, and again, that's voiding an attack to the leg. And what I'm also going to do is lean the body forward and extend the arm out. And what we're doing is we're counter-attacking. When somebody goes for our leg, we just shoot the arm forward, hit them, and pull our leg out of the way. And there's different depths. The first one I showed was real shallow. This one is a little bit farther back, and now this one's the farthest back of the three. You may even want to extend the rear arm like I do to keep your balance. But again, the lean forward will help you a bit. So that's the first preliminary look at some of the footwork that we've done. Thanks for taking a look.